At last the new moon had come. The night was pitch dark, and promises to the dead are sacred and must be kept. It was Saturday, and most people were walking around town, busily engaged shopping and going to shows at 8 o'clock. I waited till 8:30 and then went to my little workshop, opening the window wide into the cemetery. I suspended the little wagon out over the fence from the window, also 2 rubber cushions, and a couple of short towing ropes. I then darkened the room, leaving open and locking the door behind me. I went out into the cemetery through that little street gate. I walked through the proper lanes between the graves until again I reached my window. I took the wagon down from the fence, along with the other things hanging there, put everything into the wagon and began pulling it along easily in the grass. But when it developed a very annoying way of rattling, I picked it up with its contents and carried it in my arms all the rest of the way to the only illumination came from across the street. I unlocked the door of the tomb, and leaving the door wide open, I went down inside and spoke a few words into the coffin valve. "Darling, I have come to fulfill my promise to you. Sleep now, darling, gently for a while, until you are with me. God bless you." Then I screwed the valve shut tightly and took the inner metal coffin out gently, resting it obliquely on top of the large outer coffin just for a few minutes. In the meantime, I took the dark blanket outside and hung it over the iron rail near the grave, exactly as she had advised. It was wise and excellent, as I could now see, as it put the entire lower half of the entrance of the tomb into a protective black shadow. On the threshold of the door, I laid the rubber cushion so as to cover the uppermost step of the staircase inside. Everything was ready. Before going down, I took a last look around. I did not want witnesses. Satisfied that there was nobody prowling around, I went down the stairs. Inside, all of a sudden, the black crucifix above the head of her coffin shone into my eyes with a soft light which I had never seemed to have noticed before. I stepped toward it, made the sign of the cross, lifted it from the hook, kissed it, praying for my bride and for the protection of both of us. I promised to guard her and her sleeping soul and bring her back to safety with me. Now I went to work, laying the crucifix on her coffin, and with new strength lifted it up high. I placed the foot end into the door entrance. The head end I was obliged to hold and push it slowly little by little further through the door opening until the entire length rested securely in the doorway. I now went up the stairs and pulled the coffin outside, behind the shielding blanket into the soft grass. There, however, it could not stay for long, so I pulled it further around the corner of the tomb where it would be safer and out of sight. I slid the blanket from the railing and covered the bright silvery coffin with it. Nobody could possibly see anything now because everything was black. I picked up the rubber cushions, closed and locked the tomb door. My darling was now outside, ready and waiting the journey. Everything had gone well so far. With perfect ease, I lifted the casket up on my little toy wagon, 1 foot high, with the rubber cushions, 1 on each end, the blanket and crucifix covering the whole, and partly trailing on the grass. With my ropes, I tied the casket and wagon all around. With a short line attached to the beam, I pulled the precious load from behind the tomb into the open section of the lawn in a straight line toward the dark portion of the main cemetery. Luckily, the wagon ran smooth and silent now under its load. It really was a wonderfully lovely journey through this black night, along between the rows of graves with my sweetest bride in her little metal chamber. Oh, it was immensely joyful and sweet, never to be forgotten. Serenely and calm, I passed along, holding onto the reins of my hidden treasure, passing noiselessly along by the 2 guardians of the Catholic ground. A wonderfully elated feeling took complete possession of my entire being, as though a second spirit had entered my soul. It seemed that a bodyguard of veiled angels had formed on both sides, and were coming along with us, and a great inspiration filled me then. It made me feel like a victor, holding the triumphal entry in a world forgotten and buried. I felt secure, protected, and invulnerable. No matter what was coming against us now, nothing could harm either of us any more. There was no place for the living here on this blackest of all nights. All of the cemetery was alive with souls which came out of the graves from all sides, moving and thronging around us. It was indeed like a festival among the departed, as they moved up on all sides. It was like a great divine wedding march for me taking place. It could not be a funeral march, for all seemed happy and joyful and interested. In silent admiration, watching as the white forms of angels filed past with Elena and me in their midst. They were everywhere, none blocking our way, but all of them melting out of our way. It seemed as if they had never had such a celebration in the cemetery before. It was as if all were delighted and desirous to help us. The little cart, for all of its weight, seemed almost to run by itself. It responded to the slightest touch of my hand, which gave me the impression of being aided on by friendly hands reaching out of the ground. At last we arrived and had to halt. The cart could go no further. Here on this spot the whole beautiful vision disappeared. The coffin had to be lifted off the wagon. I had to carry it in my arms to the fence and put it down in the grass on the other side. This brought me to within a few feet of my open window. The coffin was now under the window, resting in the grass. I also rested for a few minutes to gather strength for my last great effort. Meanwhile, I removed the cot and things to safety. Nothing was to be left around to tell the tale. I drew my dark blanket across the windowsill with one end hanging out over the top of the wooden fence to muffle any noise. Everything was ready now for the final lift, namely the raising of the head end, which was the heaviest, slowly up until it stood near the height of the window. This succeeded well. It stood Elena's body inside almost to an upright position, but this could not be avoided for just a few seconds. Then I lifted the coffin midway high above my shoulders and head, high enough so that it would clear the fence and blanket, and pushed it toward the open window. My back was toward the fence. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet gave way. I lost my balance. It was as if all my strength had left me then. The whole load came down on my head. I crumbled under it and fell with the coffin lying on top of me, but my hands still, clamp-like, held onto my precious load. This meant tragedy if my strength would not return to me. The falling casket had squashed my new black felt hat on my head, pinning me down. Quickly realizing the danger that threatened and breathing heavily, I summoned all of my remaining strength. It must have been more. It must have been supernatural strength which flowed through me. My own had all been exhausted. Again I tried, lifting the casket slowly high above my head, rising up, and with my back pressed hard against the fence, I pushed the heavy end of the casket inside the window. There it now rested safely, while the foot end still pointed out into the cemetery. For a while I rested, unable to move a limb, but thanking all of the good souls and angels from the bottom of my heart. I did not realize it yet, but my head and hair was dripping and saturated with sweat and blood. Also my hands, sleeves, shirt, coat, and trousers were likewise wet and sticky. It soon began to smell, however, strong and obnoxious. This woke me up and warned me that there was something wrong. I soon discovered that the bottom valve of the coffin above me, underneath the foot end, had fallen out, I suppose from contact with the top edge of the fence. I still felt something dripping on my hand and shirt, running down my neck and over the woolen blanket hanging over the fence, against which I was leaning. As the powerful odor was quickly spreading, the dogs in the neighborhood began barking. I raised myself up to go inside the house and then pull in the casket. Locking the door and lifting the coffin and blanket carefully on the floor, I tilted it in such a way as to prevent any more liquid from flowing out. I then plugged the hole up tightly with cotton. Now I closed the window and made a light. My blanket was such an awful smelly mess that I had to wrap it many times securely into a parcel. My clothing and I, myself, were in the same state. There was no way for me but to take all my things off and wash them and myself with alcohol, since there was no water in the house. Still smelling strong, but more like liquor now, I closed up the house and went home by a long roundabout way, so as to give the wind and air a chance to take away the odor and to dry my clothes. The odor, however, did not leave me. No bath even would remove it from my body. I left the coffin at rest in the little house over Sunday. On Monday evening I placed it on the cushions of a large sedan car and some airplane tanks, and also propeller and parts for my airplane. Everything went fine. I arrived at the hospital grounds where the plane was without incident. This part of the hospital grounds, being behind the morgue, was quite deserted evening. Undisturbed, I had now moved my beloved into the cabin of the plane. She had now taken full possession of it.